So welcome to Edify Learning Spaces recording session with Registered Therapeutic Counsellor Nashina Miranda from Harbour Counselling and Wellness. Today's topic is about summertime sanity and how we can stay calm, connected, and compassionate. And my name is Priya Transgard, and I'm very happy to host today. My pronouns are she and her, and we are joining you from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tseil-Waituth nations, otherwise known as Vancouver. So I just want to say a little bit about Nashina and how we chose the topic. We met on numerous occasions and through Zoom, and we were talking about some of the things that parents would find helpful. And Nashina also runs a wonderful mothers group and is a mother herself. So we brainstormed some ideas, and Nashina came up with this wonderful presentation for you today. And we know that you'll get a lot of value out of it. So thank you for attending, and thank you for trying to work on yourselves so you can help your family. My company is called Edify Learning Spaces. It is a one-on-one online learning platform to help students K-12 connect their heart with their head. We focus on social emotional learning, which is why Nashina is here today. Part of social emotional learning is self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills. We'll get into that today. One of the aspects of social emotional learning is self-management. And a lot of what we'll be talking about today will include resilience, regulation of our emotions, compassion, perseverance, pause between stimulus and response, healthy boundaries, and setting and monitoring personal goals. It may not touch all of those because we'll be here for a long time, but there'll be elements of this in our presentation today. Let me tell you a little bit more about our wonderful guest. Nashina Miranda is a registered therapeutic counselor in the private practice field, where she practices at Harbour Wellness in Vancouver, BC. And her experiences working with mother and mom groups is what led me to approach Nashina to do this recording. Nashina's deep knowledge of internal narratives that often involve difficult topics, including generational trauma, is something that attracted me to Nashina, because she has all this additional information that will be beneficial. She's also the mother of a grown-up and a fur baby. Nashina has experienced the range of motherhood's ups and downs herself. And one of her guiding practices, her quotes that she sent to me was, "The only way out is through Robert Frost." And this is Nashina's foundational belief in working with clients in her practice at Harbour Counselling and Wellness. And her views and practice are a fine amalgamation of acceptance, awareness, discovery, choice, and empowerment, and will all be beneficial. It'll all be beneficial for us today. And we're so grateful that you're here, and this is a safe space for everyone who's attending. And here she is. Thank you so much. I'll leave it up to you to share from here.
Okay, perfect, Jess. We're good to go. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction and for the time and space to talk about this topic, which I think is really important. I think it's very timely, us moving into the summer months and perhaps having our little ones and our kids around us a bit more frequently. And so with this topic, the reason why I really wanted to bring attention to it is with, like you mentioned earlier, I've been facilitating mom groups over the last little while, and there has been, and just even among friends, like in my friend circle and women that I know, and even in our conversation together, there's been one underlying kind of theme, and I think it goes in two directions. One is there's a lot of moms, I think, feeling that they are the only ones experiencing what it is that they are, whether it's burnout, whether it's being stretched thin, wearing all the hats, maybe not doing or being enough, particularly around this time of COVID, right? Where we have been in such a long state of potentially anxiety and discomfort and worry and concern for our children's mental health and for their well-being. So it's really no wonder that, I think especially around this time, we might be feeling like we're wanting to do more and give more and be more just to make sure that our kids are doing well. And I think the theme that was coming up over and over again for myself as a mom and for the mothers in the group was around forgetting our own wellness and forgetting our own state of being. And I think that that's really something that we need to reclaim and revisit and reignite as far as the importance and the value in that, as a mom, a parent, a caregiver, because that is essentially what it is that our children are witnessing of us on an energetic standpoint, right? So in addition to saying in the appropriate things and being able to engage with your children in a way where you're meeting them with words and with language that is appropriate for helping to support them, we forget that there's this aspect of being able to energetically meet our children with like a calm state, or as much of a calm state as we can harness at the time, so that in turn allows them some room and space to also maybe regulate a little bit. And so this is kind of exciting. It's an exciting topic for me because I often think I don't really think a lot of people recognize how empowered we actually are with being able to access that for ourselves and then in turn for our children. So before we get to the good stuff, some of the common barriers that we might experience, time, right? That sort of gift of time, whether it's feeling like there's not enough or there's too much. And I say too much because I've talked to a lot of women that feel like there's too much time to think. There's too much time to be alone with your thoughts. And that can be uncomfortable, and that can be a little unsettling, especially when we're feeling anxious and the to-dos are running through our minds, or the worries, the concerns, which are all really valid, of course, right? But how do we not let that escape and snowball? And then how do we also help manage our time where we're not completely feeling burnt out? So time management is, I think, a really huge one, especially now that things are opening up for now. We're so excited about that, I think, and that might prompt a tendency to oversaturate our schedules and really like go in full blast. So how can we be a bit more cognizant of just being a little more attentive to that? Our mental wellness. So the goal would be clarity, attentiveness, alertness, just feeling clear. And so the opposite to that is maybe feelings of being foggy, maybe just slow moving, lethargic, just not really feeling like you have immediate access to clear thinking. And that can really be a huge barrier in being able to, what you showed us on that great graph before, is in the midst of trigger and response is this gift of clarity, this space, this room. And so working to really incorporate tools and tips and techniques to give yourself a little bit more of that space will be really helpful. Emotional wellness, behavior, moods, that could potentially lead to anxiety, worry, depression. And so, what is sort of repressed in us comes outward in our behaviors, right? So in terms of, not really managing our stress, our anxiety, our worry, our concern in healthy, productive ways, can really exhibit itself like lashing out, snapping, if you're a little person, tantrums and just being moody and regressing into other types of behaviors. So those are some of the common barriers I think that were coming up quite a bit. And so some of the things that we can do to mitigate in our next slide are tips, tools, and some love. So I've kind of broken it down into what we were looking at the previous slide here. I love this idea of micro moments. I think sometimes there's this notion that we have to make our whatever we invest our time in like when we're dedicating a particular slot of time to something, it has to be this grandiose demonstration of something, and it really doesn't have to be. So a micro moment for me would be, my son, like you had mentioned, Priya, is much older now. He's 19, and so this doesn't necessarily speak to my here and now, but I do remember when he was little, it would be like washing my hands in the bathroom for that, like, what is it, 35 seconds you might get to quickly run in there and do your business, and washing my hands with like a really beautiful scented soap, and just paying attention to what it feels like to wash your hands under warm water with something that smells really good, taking a big breath of that in and enjoying that like 5 second window and allowing it to really just consume you almost. And I know that sounds maybe a little bit like, really, is that really going to do the trick? And it may or may not. This is just, everything doesn't work for everyone, but it's just an example of how can you use what we've got and maximize it. If you're walking to the park with your child and there's like this beautiful, massive tree and the sun is shining and the leaves are kind of lit up, notice that. Invite your child to notice that, like the magnitude of this massive trunk of the tree and how deep its roots must be, and how pretty and green the leaves look. It's just soaking those little moments in to bring mindful, intentional attention to something outside of yourself. So micro moments, to really relish and access a particular state of being can be really, really helpful. Planning ahead, I think, is also really helpful. And this is for us as parents and as moms, and for children. I guess this is age appropriate as well, but I often remember for my son, for Isaiah, giving a little bit of a synopsis of what the day was going to look like, or maybe what the moment was going to look like. So we're going to go here. This is what we're going to do. This is how much time we're going to spend. It's almost like sort of planting the seed ahead of time so that there is this mapping out of what's to be expected. Not that it's always going to go down that way. We know children have their own agenda sometimes, but it's just getting into that practice of trying to plan your day as much as you can so that you're feeling like you're able to address all the things that you need to, whether it's, you're working from home at the same time, you've got your child there. How can you map out your day where you're able to at least find little slivers of pockets where you're giving back to yourself as well? So for me, that works in a form of a list. So I actually end up every morning, I'll write down all of my to-dos, and I've actually gotten into the habit of highlighting the absolute priorities. This is kind of work related, and then whatever else can just be pinned for another time, and whatever can be pinned for another time allows me some space for myself. So if that means I'm going to go walk around the block in between clients and soak in a little bit of that fresh air, then that's what I'll do. So planning ahead, just to help facilitate you finding little golden nuggets of time, of those micro moments, can be really useful. Limiting distractions, I put in brackets eliminate. I don't know that that's entirely feasible, but again, this is really doable in the sense of like, can you, when you are spending one-on-one time with your child, or when you are doing something for yourself, can you just turn your phone on airplane mode for like that 15 to 20 minutes so that the buzzing and the dinging and the vibrating or whatever it might be is off? And it's just amazing what a solid pocket of intentional attention with what you are engaging in, particularly with our kids. It's just, how important does that feel for you when you get that one-on-one, direct, undivided attention? It just feels like you're fully seen and you're fully heard, and it feels kind of amazing. And so to be able to give yourself that gift, I think is really beautiful. So however that works for you, to limit your distractions so you can just fully saturate yourself in what you're doing, especially if you're with your child, I think is a real beautiful gift. And I also think in turn, if they are experiencing that uninterrupted time with you, I wonder how that practiced often and consistently might shift, how much they might be interrupting you or how much attention they might need from you if you are committing that one-on-one zone with them. Time is energy. Reassess your yeses and your nos. I have a really dear friend of mine who has taught me the gift of no as a complete sentence. And I used to experience her do this and witness her do this. And I was always so blown away by her capacity to just say the word kindly and with love, and just not offer any kind of explanation behind her no. And I found it fascinating. I don't know about you, but I think just by creatures of habit, we tend to want to offer excuses why we cannot do something. And I think that's a guilt-fueled thing, particularly as a mom. And so really just ensure that anytime you say yes to something, you are saying no to something. And so if you are saying no to something, is that something or someone you, or is it someone or something that you could commit time to in order to like refill your cup? And so again, I guess this goes back to even planning ahead. Really try to ask yourself that question. If I'm saying yes, is it like a real clear hell yes? And if I'm saying no, is it in service of being able to protect my boundaries around what's important to me? Mental wellness. So this sounds really basic. It's literally 4 words here, but I think it's so important. Eat, sleep, move, repeat. And so for me, I found a lot of my clarity and my defogging and being able to really quickly access that clarity for myself has a lot to do with these things, right? So eating really well, limiting certain things. If I am feeling really stressed, for me, that means not cutting out, but just being mindful of my intake of things that I'm ingesting. And this isn't diet related. I want to be really clear. This is just because how that impacts our body and our stress response and our stress levels. It really makes a huge difference. There's this book, I don't know if I've resourced it at the end of the slides, but it's called Burnout. The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. I highly recommend this book. It talks a great deal around sleep and its importance. I think we all know that on a really like superficial level, but in terms of just overall functionality, I think it's so important. Your movement. I think this is really great because you can involve so much of this with your kids too, right? I mean, a good shakeout with putting on some tunes and just moving in the living room and busting it out with your kids just to like shake out some of that stagnant energy, I think can be so fun. And it can be such a great teacher to our children on sometimes we don't have to talk about everything. Sometimes, talking about our triggers or our upsets or our emotions may not be appropriate. They may not be able to find the words for it. And I don't think that that's age appropriate. I mean, my son, in his teenage years did not want to sit down and talk to me about certain things. So if it was a suggestion to why don't you go up to the basketball court and go throw some hoops, that's movement, and that's movement of this stagnant energy. And so that in and of itself is a real testament to, okay, like, let's come up with a way that works for you to release some of this. And so movement, I think, is a really important part of mental wellness. And then that repeat button, find what works for you in those avenues, and then just make it consistent and make it an active part of your day-to-day. The last one here is emotional wellness. So there's a couple of things on here. That acceptance piece can be really challenging for us. And so acceptance of what is actively happening in the moment, the more resistance I think we have to our kids' behavior, to our behavior, to responses, to circumstances, the more resistance there is, the less of a buffet there is on the table of choice. It kind of just shuts the door a little bit, and it makes it really hard to access what else we can do. And so when I say acceptance, I don't mean acceptance in the sense of throwing our hands up and saying, oh, well, but it's like, okay, well, this is what I'm dealing with in the here and now. this is a situation, and so what do I have on the table, if anything, to resource? The accountability piece, I think, is massive. So this might be a little unfavorable for some to hear it, especially if you're kind of in a tender place of your parenting journey. But that accountability piece, I think, is a real massive gift for our children to experience of us. And so, you know, when we've maybe reacted instead of responded, if we've gotten, you know, triggered and we've come to our children in a certain way, or we've demonstrated or shown up in a way that wasn't necessarily unfavorable, I think coming back and showing some accountability and cleaning that up a little bit is really, really impactful, because for two reasons. Number one, you know, we're human and we're allowed to make mistakes, and no one really gave us a manual on how to do this parenting thing. I mean, there's manuals and there's books out there, but our children are different. Our kids are different, and we're coming from different experiences of our own upbringing and our own journey of what we are carrying into that relationship. And we're not going to do it right all the time. And we shouldn't be doing it right all the time, because then where is the learning for us and for our children? And so to come and say, how many times, I can't even tell you, I wish my son was sitting right here next to me, because the amount of times I've gone and said sorry for, you know, showing up a certain way. But then it goes further to apologizing. It goes in terms of like, what now? Like, what is your commitment to bettering that part of yourself and that part of the relationship? And then it demonstrates to your child, what does it mean to actually, you know, show remorse for behavior? What does it mean to take responsibility for maybe not showing up as your best self, and then making a commitment to maybe try to do better next time? So this goes beyond just saying sorry. I think that this is a learning of how your child can witness you being vulnerable, how your child can witness you being creative and empathic and responsible and authentic and human, right? That mommy and daddy can make mistakes too. Like, wow, mind blown. Like, we're not these walking perfect beings that know exactly what to do at any given time. So I think that accountability piece is really underutilized, and I think it's really empowering. Boundaries are really, again, important, because I think that this is, again, a demonstration for our children. My sister is really, really good at this, and it took her a really long time. But when her children are older, but when she carves out time for herself, she lets it be known. And so from X to this, for this next 45 minutes, I'm going to be here and I'm going to be doing this. And I'd like to not be interrupted, unless, of course, it's an emergency. But she's really very clear about, this is what I'm doing, this is why I need it, and this is what I would like from you. And there's like this agreement based on that. And then it's reciprocal. So then you can ask your child the same question, like, what do your boundaries look like when you're in the middle of playtime and I'm interrupting you because I thought of something, or I need you to set the table, or I needed to do X, Y, and Z. You know, how can you demonstrate and teach your children how to vocalize maybe their boundaries of what they need? So I really think that that is also an important life skill to start to establish in your household, so that they can execute that growing up. Compassion is just key, right? So compassion when you are being accountable, compassion when you are exercising boundaries. There is always a loving way to communicate this. There is always like a really soft and gentle way in which you can establish these without being rigid and firm and coming across kind of authoritative. And then forgiveness for when you do goof, just really demonstrating that ability to say, you know what, like, I so poo-pooed on this and I did not handle this well at all. And I'm okay. Like, I'm allowed to make mistakes, and then that active next step of how can I mitigate that? And I call it the cleanup committee. How can you access your cleanup committee and go in and make amends with that? So I think, you know, again, I don't think all of this is going to work for everyone, but if you find one or two little nuggets in each category, to play around with. I'm excited to see how that might better support you in your summertime sanity with your children. There's some additional resources here for your review. Just a couple little things that have been so impactful for me. There's an amazing book by Dr. Shefali Sabari called The Awakened Family. She's got an abundance of information on YouTube, and you can find videos just about anywhere. And so if you can't sit down with a book, I highly encourage you to just Google. Really a lovely way. The philosophy behind that is that to raise our consciousness of ourselves, and raising ourselves to the highest state, so that we are then presenting that version of ourselves to our children. We're not kind of using our kids to funnel through our own agendas. Big Life Journal on Facebook is an awesome page to follow. Great resources for kids and parents. Cosmic Kids Yoga is a resource that a girlfriend of mine introduced me to for her children. Her daughter like drops into Savasana when she's feeling overwhelmed and just lays there and really enjoys it. And then support groups. I've got my mom group, but there's so much out there. And so find your, because you are not solo. That much I can tell you for sure. This is where you can find me. So if you have questions, you need some more resources, you'd like to join a mom group, you'd like to give feedback or insight, input on future offerings, I love to hear it all. So these are some avenues that you can reach me at.
Well, thank you so much, Nashina. I feel like, we rarely see all of the tips, tool, and love all on one page like this. And I think we know little pieces and bits and pieces of it. But when you look at it, it's so organized and simple. There's something that we can all work on to reach our higher selves, to be better parents. And, a few of the things that really stood out to me were the micro moments. I was listening to a podcaster who goes into war-torn cities and works with the children recovering there. And she was talking about the tree and how this tree was a source of gratitude. And the more that there was a focus on the tree and getting lost in the beauty of the tree, that it actually helped heal. And so when you started talking about the tree itself, of course, I made that parallel, but that is so wonderful. I've been trying to do micro moments myself and be really intentional, but, like everything else, I kind of, you try to organize your eating and your sleeping and your moving, and then you sometimes forget about your micro moments, and that it doesn't have to be like an orchestrated thing. So I really appreciate, you sharing that. And I do want to share a little bit about the accountability. I remember I was a director of a childcare facility where my son was also attending, and he's he's autistic and he has special needs. And so there was a moment where he lost his emotional regulation, and he couldn't control what he was doing, and he started to throw toys in an area, and all the kids moved away, and I immediately went into like, pick up the toys. And then I gave him some space, and one of the early childhood educators, whispered to me, just try saying sorry. And I was like, I don't even know what I did. And she's like, just try it.
Yeah.
And I did, and it completely changed everything. And it turned out that I triggered him by saying, like, put your lunchbox away. And but I didn't realize that, because then, there was the emotional regulation and working up to that. And then it was dysregulation, and then it was moving around, and it wasn't linear. Like, it kind of went, and then it came out later. And then there were throwing of items. And then the next person that came into the room, they triggered him because he was already teetering on the edge. And then he started to throw items, and, I wouldn't have thought to say sorry.
Right.
but it worked, and it stopped it right away. Right away. It was like the fastest thing I've ever seen.
That's amazing. It's so amazing. And I love your sharing of your example because it's isn't it? I mean, when hearing you say it, it's so simple. It's just such a simple offering. And there's so many reasons why as parents we might be resistant and or not even think, not even consider doing it as you had mentioned, right? But I love that you're sharing the story because it's just even for the parent who like yourself may not have even have thought to do that. I wonder how much just that alone would open up a window for a child to then just feel seen, right? And just feel like heard and cared for in that sense. And you kind of hit the nail on the head at this point. It's really just about, you know, us going in and demonstrating that little piece of accountability and saying, I'm really sorry. It gives them permission to then also understand. It takes like the shame out of behavior, you know, especially if they're just at an age where they're figuring things out, particularly if, like for your son, that piece of like sort of emotional dysregulation might be a little bit more common and more active. It just removes a little bit of that extra layer of feeling ashamed and feeling guilty. And don't we all want that for our kids, right? Just to kind of allow them to sort of feel like, yeah, you're allowed to make a mistake and you can go in and apologize too. It just that permission piece, which is so great.
It's so important. And yeah, just I'm so glad that you had that on there. It's like the ABCs. It's so important. And but it's a reminder too, because I don't walk around thinking that that's a tool like in my tool belt. So it's a great reminder, even though it was so beneficial. Having you point it out is actually a great reminder that, oh, I can always use that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I
Bring it
do
into practice.
for sure. And I'll just sort of add this little nugget, you know, for parents that you know, culturally speaking, you know, upbringing can be so impactful in terms of that sort of idea of why do I need to apologize or I don't need to do that. It's kind of there's that big resistance piece, which I completely understand, and I see that a lot. I see that a lot in some of the people that I support, and just even in my own family dynamics, is really really pertinent. And so, you know, I would just gently offer you this one question. It's like if you were to go back and revisit, you know, your younger self when you were really little itty bitty, wouldn't you have appreciated the same? And
Mm.
if the answer is yes to that, then that's just an invitation to reconsider. Just reconsider that accountability piece. It's hard, and I get that. I understand it can come systemically, right, from just down the line. But most often, what you felt you might have wanted when you were little is probably what your kid is looking for too.
Oh, that's so sweet. And thank you so much for bringing in that piece of culture, because I think oftentimes, there's that cultural piece that isn't really talked about as a form of resistance of why we're not, open to, kind of going against our early learnings, right? And our early learnings were like, sometimes age dependent. You respect somebody because they're older, and you respect your parents because they're older. And if you respect them, then you wouldn't be expecting a sorry from them, or something along those lines. I can't even remember now, but because I'm trying to reprogram this. And it's okay. Some of the stuff is definitely deep in there, and that's okay, and it's part of my journey. But yeah, I think it's really important to note that, even that cultural aspect of it as well. um yeah, and there's so much still to learn. There's still so much to learn, and I think it's really important to bring that cultural piece into it as well.
Yeah, I
Thank you
agree.
for that. Thank you, Nishina. So I think, you've got great, resources here, and, people can contact you by going to your website, or they can email you at Nishina at harborcw.com. And you're also on Facebook and LinkedIn, all the socials. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, just getting that Instagram, IG world on point. So soon.
Okay. All right. You know
Yeah.
what? I definitely will put pieces of this on Instagram so people will be able to see it and then link it to the YouTube channel that we have with all of your information on there as well. So it will be all the bases will be covered. And so I'm excited for people to, and especially moms to see as we move into this transition, we're moving, out of our pandemic normal and moving into another normal, and that transition phase of what we considered safe is now opening up. And so I think that this will help many people. And I'm very grateful for all your suggestions and all your knowledge.
Thank you. I'll just leave one last little thought that entered mine, if that's okay.
Yes.
So and we spoke about this actually when we chatted over Zoom not too long ago, and I just think it's really worthwhile mentioning again. And I don't say this from a place of instilling like fear or pressure or worry, but from a genuinely loving place. Um, I think when we recognize that the way in which we make our own choices, like as mothers, parents, as caregivers, as people, to take care of ourselves, to make a commitment to pay a bit more extra attention to ourselves and our own wellness. Keep in mind that this is the way your child is witnessing you um, take actionable steps towards self-care, self-love. How do you honor yourself? How are you honoring your own being and your own wellness? Like, what are you taking seriously? And so a lot of children, like, they watch a lot, they witness a lot. And so I just would love to leave you with that if there's any better reason to take a little bit more time and space for yourself and your wellness, because you are quite literally mirroring that out to your kids on how to do it. And I think that that's really, really important, because we all want that for our kids to grow up and love well and be well and just function well. So take that time for yourself. You deserve it.
Thank you so much, Nishina. And I think that's a great way to end off this presentation. And we definitely appreciate all the eyes that are going to be watching this. And I know that'll make a difference for anyone who hears this. I know it'll make a positive impact in their lives. So thank you so much for that, Nishina. And I guess we'll all see each other online.
Yes, thank you for the time and space. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.